The euphrates simply may not be with us for much longer. It is drying up at a pace that heralds an unprecedented humanitarian crisis for those who rely on its life-sustaining waters. Add to the fact that they will lead an aggressive army of 200 million soldiers who will kill a third of all human beings on planet Earth, and the possibility becomes downright existential. The Euphrates River, a waterway that has served as a lifeline for Western Asia since time immemorial. Its humble beginnings in the Turkish mountains gradually swell over the course of 1,700 miles, snaking through Syria and Iraq, widening to 1.7 miles before eventually joining the Tigris and emptying into the Persian Gulf. These are the banks that gave birth to the Middle Eastern civilization itself. The Tigris and Euphrates form the famous Fertile Crescent, a particularly productive region whose rich soil allowed the easy propagation of agriculture, and with it, a shift from mankind's nomadic hunter-gatherer lifestyle to living in city-states. Beginning in Sumer, sometime around the 5th or 6th century BC, Mesopotamian cultures throughout the Fertile Crescent began producing miraculous innovations still with us to this day. Inventions including not only irrigation and agriculture, but the wheel, glassworking, and even writing itself. The area along the Euphrates is now recognized as one of the Old World's cradles of civilization, that is, say, a region where urban settlements emerged, independent of outside influence. Suffice to say, the Euphrates is among the most important rivers in the world, looming large in the cultural consciousness of the Middle East. But the Euphrates simply may not be with us for much longer. It is drying up at a pace that heralds an unprecedented humanitarian crisis for those who rely on its life-sustaining waters. Today, parts of the river sit at record lows, the worst water crisis in years, according to some environmentalists. At least 5 million people are at risk of being left without water for drinking and farming should the Euphrates vanish. Part of a broader regional water crisis that threatens 12 million Syrians and Iraqis in some form or fashion. Jordan and Israel have been employing drought diplomacy to navigate the challenges posed by limited water resources, challenges which include power outages from struggling hydroelectric plants. To make matters worse, according to some, this environmental catastrophe will bring consequences of biblical proportions. Literally. The book of Revelation, the final entry of the New Testament penned by the Apostle John, outlines a number of prophetic visions offering a play-by-play of the earth's final days. These apocalyptic visions include numerous calamities, including armed conflicts between nations, disease, famine, and general wickedness among the world's population. So, basically everyday life since 2020. Now, against this backdrop, rise and fall of other players like the seven-headed dragon, the beast, the serpent, and the Antichrist. While horrific, all this torment and suffering is part of a necessary series of events culminating in the second coming of Jesus Christ. And one of the signs will be the emptying of the Euphrates. Now, the Euphrates River is mentioned over 20 times in the Christian Bible. Like the land it quenches, it winds through the stories of the Bible's most pivotal moments, as well as the lives of those involved. It is the boundary that the Lord bestowed upon Abraham when blessing him with land. It is where Nimrod founded the religion of Babylon, the city-state which infamously blossomed into the wide-spanning empire. The Euphrates also served another important role as a boundary. It is one of 4 rivers associated with the Garden of Eden in Genesis 2:10-14, where it is sometimes translated in its modern Hebrew name, Parat, I believe, or so it's called. How appropriate. Now, according to the Bible, the river where creation began will also play a pivotal role in how creation ends. The final appearance of the Euphrates occurs in the book of Revelation. Specifically, Revelation 16:12-16. Then the 6th angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the 4 horns of the golden altar, which is before God, saying to the 6th angel who had the trumpet, "Release the 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates." So the 4 angels who had been prepared for the hour and the day and month and year were released to kill a third of mankind. Now the number of the army of the horsemen was 200 million. I heard the number of them, and thus I saw the horses in the vision. Those who sat on them had breastplates of fiery red, hyacinth blue and sulfur yellow, and the heads of the horses were like the heads of lions, and out of their mouth came fire, smoke, and brimstone. By these 3 plagues, a third of mankind was killed by the fire and the smoke and the brimstone which came out of their mouths. For their power is in their mouth and in their tails. For their tails are like serpents, having heads, and with them they do harm. Our culture has done angels a disservice. If one takes a literal biblical perspective, they are much, much different than our modern art would have us believe, and much stranger. First off, the idea that anyone who dies can become an angel is not rooted in biblical theology. That idea was popularized by 18th century Swedish mystic Emanuel Swedenborg. That isn't to say that dearly departed Aunt Ethel isn't helping you on your calculus exam, but she doesn't belong to the class of beings known as angels, or more commonly referred to in Hebrew as spirit beings, Elohim. Secondly, angels don't necessarily look like beautiful people with bird wings. More often than not, they are terrifying. So much so that their greeting throughout the Bible is a constant refrain of, "Be not afraid." While some seem more humanoid in configuration, others are described in the Bible and related texts as interlocking, living wheels with multiple, sometimes even thousands of wings, eyes, and other appendages. Sure, I won't be afraid right after I change my underwear. These descriptions of angels might be literal. They also might be a poetic way of conveying the fact that beholding angels is something beyond human description, something that can never be put into words. To make them even more intimidating, angels are possessed of terrifying divine power. So, suffice to say, the release of 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates is a possibility that should make us all poop our pants a little. Add to the fact that they will lead an aggressive army of 200 million soldiers who will kill a third of all human beings on planet Earth, and the possibility becomes downright existential. For those math nerds playing alone at home, a third of all human beings is around 2.7 billion people wiped out by this conquering force. Depending on your interpretation, the other calamities which befall us in the Great Tribulation will wipe out a full 50% of the planet's population before Christ's triumphant return, meaning 4 billion people will be left. But that is just one interpretation, and in fact, I think that there's probably going to be a lot less, because when you go through Revelations, you see all the natural and man-made calamities that happen. And there's no way by the time you get to the end that there's still 4 billion people, but again, that's an opinion, so we don't know. Now, for those that aren't exactly knowledgeable with the Bible, there is another big thing going around where people are showing the Euphrates River drying up, and they're claiming that the angels in which that are supposed to come out of the river are actually the 4 horsemen, but this is nonsense because it's not even biblical. In fact, if we look at the beginning of Revelations, we can see that the 4 horsemen are technically the first things to start the tribulation, and these have nothing to do with the 4 spirits that come out of the river Euphrates. In fact, this is a common case of people taking things biblically completely out of context and not understanding how they work together. Seems pretty common in the modern age, unfortunately. So long story short, what I'm saying is the 4 spirits that are supposed to come out of the river Euphrates are not the 4 horsemen, and there is also no correlation between them because there is a massive time difference. And while we're on this topic, who are these angels destined to be set loose on humanity? It's impossible to say for certain. It seems that whoever they are, they have fallen out of the Lord's grace. They might well be the angels described in the book of Jude, chapter 1, verses 5 through 7. Though you already know all this, I want to remind you that the Lord at one time delivered his people out of Egypt, but later destroyed those who did not believe. And the angels who did not keep their positions of authority but abandoned their proper dwelling, these has kept in darkness, bound with everlasting chains for judgment on the great day. If this is the identity of the 4 angels bound at the Euphrates, they are also the same beings described in 2 Peter chapter 2. In their greed, these teachers will exploit you with fabricated stories. Their condemnation has long been hanging over them, and their destruction has not been sleeping. For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but sent them to hell, putting them in chains of darkness to be held for judgment, if this is so, then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials and to hold the unrighteousness for punishment on the day of judgment. Are these the same chains somehow bound or beneath the Euphrates River? And does the slow death of that waterway herald the imminent return to destroy a third of the earth at the front of the army of the kings from the east? The fallen angels imprisoned at the Euphrates might also be the Watchers, a mysterious group of angels mentioned in the passing book of Daniel. Some Watchers were good, some were bad. The rebellious ones are the ones you hear about the most. In Daniel 4:13, 17, and 23, we hear about these figures. While referred to as messengers, they could also be accurately translated as watchmen. In the visions I saw while lying in bed, I looked, and there before me was a holy one, a messenger coming down from heaven. The decision is announced by messengers. The holy ones declare the verdict, so that the living may know that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and gives them to anyone he wishes, and sets over them the lowliest of people. Your Majesty saw a holy one, a messenger coming down from heaven, and saying, "Cut down the tree and destroy it, but leave the stump bound with iron and bronze in the grass of the field, while its roots remain in the ground. Let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, let him live with the wild animals, until 7 times pass by for him." Most of what we know about the Watchers, however, comes from the infamous book of Enoch. The books of Enoch are apocryphal, meaning that they were of sufficiently doubtful origin or unknown authorship that, while contemporary with the Bible, they were left out. The church considers them non-canonical, but that hasn't stopped curious people from scouring these books over the centuries. The books take their name from the patriarchal figure Enoch, great-grandfather to Noah, who infamously built his ark during the Great Flood to save all living things on earth and preserve the righteous vestiges of humanity. Much of the text is apocalyptic and chronicles the fall of a segment of the Lord's once beloved Watchers. According to the second book of Enoch, the Watchers were in 5th heaven when the fall occurred. Many, if not most people interested in the Watchers believe that their fall is retelling of the Sons of God narrative found in the book of Genesis. This tale has inspired countless alternative researchers over the years, from unorthodox biblical scholars to occultists and even UFOologists. The Sons of God narrative appears in Genesis 6:1-4. "And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, and they were fair. And they took them wives of which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, but that he also in flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown." While other interpretations have risen and fallen in popularity, the earliest scholars believe that the sons of God referred to angels. The narrative represents one of the earliest examples of human unions with the spirit world, a trope which is, at least superficially, is echoed in ufology. Now, to this day, many researchers believe that the primary reason for UFO contact is a long-term human-alien hybridization program carried out by extraterrestrials. The motivations behind this secret agenda vary, including everything from spiritual ascension to a slow-motion invasion of planet Earth. Either way, the major motifs are the same as the Sons of Man's story. Non-human forces from the sky descending to the earth to create hybrid offspring. The first book of Enoch elaborates on the Sons of God story in chapter 6, verses 1-6, saying this, "And it came to pass, when the children of men had multiplied, that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels and the children of heaven saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose us wives from among the children, and beget us children. And Semyaza, who was their leader, said unto them, I fear ye will not indeed agree to this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin. And they all answered him and said, Let us all swear an oath and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. Then swear they all together and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And they were in 200 who descended in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon. And they called it Mount Hermon because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. The book of Enoch then goes on to list some of the names of the Watchers. Now in the Bible, the offspring of the fallen angels and the daughters of men are often interpreted as being the Nephilim. As Genesis 6 alludes, these fallen angel-human hybrids were gigantic. Numbers 13:32-33 mentions them again. And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land that they had explored. They said, "The land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw there are of great size. We saw the Nephilim there. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." Today, the Nephilim have become something of a catch-all explanation for all varieties of supernatural beings, from UFO occupants to Bigfoot and even other less humanoid cryptids. Some researchers take the mythology of the Watchers even further, bringing them fully into modern politics and cultural imagery. The Watchers are a common theme among a branch of researchers known as synchromystics. Synchromystism, from a skeptical standpoint, assigns occult detail to mundane coincidences. From a synchromystic's standpoint, they are revealing the underlying bedrock beneath all of reality. Some believe that this points to a fundamental archetypal reality beneath our waking reality, where images and themes bubble up spontaneously on their own. Other synchromystics hold that these coincidences are anything but the product of mere chance. They are orchestrated by an elite cabal of powerful sorcerers in control of every facet of our existence, from religions to governments and corporations even. You know when you put money in a vending machine and the bag of potato chips gets stuck and the machine eats your money anyway? That's them too. Darn elite cabals and their sonship cartels. As you can imagine, synchromystism often tackles hot-button issues implicating powerful, prominent individuals and their perceived schemes. The result brings the discipline right to the edge of acceptable discourse, oftentimes, but not always, flirting with ideologies that are perceived by mainstream culture as being dangerous or on the fringe. Much of modern synchromystic thinking can be traced to the mysterious 20th century figure known as the James Shelby Downard, who pioneered the connections between seemingly insignificant details and major world events. It was Downard who, in his famous essay, King Kill 33, Masonic Symbolism in the Assassination of John F. Kennedy, defined modern paranoid thinking alongside other figures like Milton Will Bill Cooper. Today, some synchromystics believe that much of the dissent we see in the world is a direct result of a cult dedicated to bringing about the return of the Watchers. A return that, as we've discussed, may be directly related to the evaporation of the Euphrates River. Perhaps the disappearance of the Euphrates means that the Watcher cult is succeeding in their goal. To give you an idea of how the synchromystic thinking works, many researchers focus on the proliferation of eye imagery in popular culture, such as an indication of this Watcher cult's influence. It certainly seems that just about any photo shoot of a pop star or celebrity includes at least one image of their fingers surrounding their eye, isolating and highlighting them. You know, those ads that are always like this, or doing things like that, or even like this, to represent the Masonic triangle in the eye. Anyway, here though is where synchromystics break off from the mainstream researchers, such as they are. Now, most people see the eye symbolism as a coincidence, or an artistic flourish. Researchers interested in secret societies see this as a sign of an entirely human Earth-based group like the Illuminati. But synchromystics almost always believe that there is a supernatural occult component at play. Whether or not the supernatural is real is inconsequential. Their point is that powerful players in highly placed positions believe that the supernatural is real and that are engineering society to manifest it in our own reality. Christopher Knowles, who runs the Secret Sun blog, has speculated that two cults, closely related, might be pulling the levers in our society. One of them follows the Roman god Mithras, while the other adores the Watchers. Knowles cites one recent tragedy as an example of how watcher imagery has taken root in our global culture. While a good example of the kinds of links that synchromystics look for, be warned that the event is recent enough that this sort of analysis may not be viewed as tasteful. Now, on November 5th, 2021, Travis Scott held a concert at the Astroworld Festival. A fatal crowd crush ensued, killing a total of 10 people. But in this tragedy, Knowles sees several telltale synchromystic hints that the event may have been part of some sort of ritual, perhaps unknown even to conference organizers and participants. If not a ritual, then it was just the continued repeated patterns of synchromysticism echoing throughout time. As a precursor, Knowles points to the infamous 1969 Rolling Stones concert at Altamont Speedway in Livermore, California, which left 3 people dead and countless others badly injured. The deaths were attributed to the poor security at the event, which was at the responsibility of the people, the Hells Angels. Yes, the band actually hired a notorious biker gang to handle security. Great idea, Rolling Stone. Really, A+ work. Knowles noted that the Altamont deaths, the most infamous concert deaths until 2021, happened at the hands of a group called the Angels. What's more, Altamont is Spanish for high mountain. A mountain like Mount Hermon, epicenter of where the Watchers descended to Earth. Isn't that interesting? Flash forward to Astroworld, the backdrop for 2021. Astroworld Performances was a gigantic mountain. The stage resembled an inverted cross, a powerful occult symbol challenging and mocking Christian authority. The end of the cross sat in what appeared to be several concentric rings, almost like a portal to another realm. According to Knowles, the concentric rings bring to mind the various circles of hell. Hell, or more accurately Tartarus, the infernal region in Greek belief, was once believed to reside within Mount Hermon itself, where the Watchers first appeared and where they were imprisoned. Mount Hermon is over 200 miles from the Euphrates at its closest distance, but is definitely in the same region. Could the Watchers be the same angels destined to be released from Mount Hermon when the river runs dry? All this may seem like a coincidence until one looks at the events preceding the Astroworld disaster. The poster for the 2021 Astroworld Festival includes 2 wing-like hands thrusting forward above the mountain stage. Within the palm of each hand sits an eye, symbols of the Watchers. Okay, this is getting weird. There's also the unsettling promotional concert that Travis Scott held to the popular video game Fortnite. In 2020, Scott appeared in a video game music video entitled Astronomical, hinting at the future tragedy that would define his career. The video features plenty of Watcher imagery, including a luminous being descending from the stars to emerge through a portal. Its arrival is accompanied by a large structure resembling a reimagined biblical angel, a series of wheel-like curves covered in round objects like eyes. When the presence from the stars lands in the video game environment, it is Travis Scott. He is a giant, towering over the landscape, a giant like the Nephilim, the product of the daughters of men and the Watchers. Now, none of this endorses Christopher Knowles' theory, but it is a fascinating collision of images and symbols to watch unfold. A collision rendered terrifying by the other strife that we see in the world. Trials that many view as incontrovertible signs that we are approaching the end of days. Even if purely coincidental, it might suggest that there are forces operating underneath our reality far, far beyond our control. So, is it merely a coincidence that the Euphrates is drying up at the same time that so much Watcher imagery is appearing in pop culture? Or are the synchromystics correct? Is it intentional or coincidental? Are the elites trying to bring about the apocalypse, or are they reacting to what they have seen unfolding in the world around them? Let's take a breath and regroup here. It's easy to get worked up over the topics like this and start seeing connections where there are simply none. This is what author Robert Anton Wilson referred to as chapel perilous, a state of mind where one is unable to discern whether or not events, either in your own life or the world at large, are orchestrated by supernatural forces or are simply the result of chance. Go too deep into this psychological state and, odds are, you'll either emerge from it broken or agnostic. Agnostic is the better choice. No one is saying that the supernatural does not exist, but randomness exists too. I mean, even if this watcher imagery is legitimate, it doesn't mean for a certainty that shadowy organizations are orchestrating every aspect of our lives. I mean, I could throw eggs, flour, butter, milk, baking soda, and sugar in a bowl, but it doesn't mean that I've made a cake. There's another step, a process required. Likewise, just because all the components of a ritual are present doesn't mean a ritual is taking place. There are also the consequences of technological progress to consider. The region around the Euphrates is suffering from a historical drought. Many of the low water levels we see in the river can be attributed to sparser rainfall in the region, down 70% by some estimates. Many believe this is to be a result of climate change. In reality, the drying of the Euphrates is neither unique nor new. Many rivers around the world are reporting historic lows. The Mississippi, for example, has set low water records in 3 American states alone. Concerns surrounding the Euphrates River's recession began at least 20 years ago. In 2003, the drop in the river was accompanied by the Iraq War, leading many to believe that the end of the world was right around the corner. At the time, many pointed to Revelation 9:11, which seemed an especially ill-omened passage in the years following September 11, 2001. Or, for those of you across the pond, that's our 9/11. In this passage, John describes an army of locusts set upon humanity named Abaddon in Hebrew or Apollyon in Greek. Both words mean destroyer, one of multiple meanings for the name Saddam, referencing the despotic leader of Iraq, Saddam Hussein. Now 20 years later, and we're still here. Thankfully, I guess, the 2020s are getting old. While it is more than possible that the bowl that the sixth angel empties takes decades to pass, this sense of time definitely imparts less urgency than the recent interest of the Euphrates suggest. Concerns regarding the river's water level resurfaced again in 2009, 2017, and now today. This is not to suggest that we shouldn't be concerned with the falling water levels in the Euphrates. At least some of the blame can be placed upon Turkey, which, according to one expert, is unintentionally paving the way for the fulfillment of biblical prophecy within our lifetimes by damming up the Euphrates. This statement, made in 2021 by biblical scholar and professor Tom Meyer, references the 1990 completion of the Ataturk Dam, the 3rd largest dam in the world. It sits on the Euphrates in southeastern Turkey, and while providing a massive amount of hydroelectric power for the region's population, has undoubtedly contributed to the diminished flow of the river. It is one of the 5 dams along the Euphrates which may say are strangling this important waterway. The disappearance of rivers has long been tied to prophecies of calamity. In 2012, a pastor by the name of Levi spent 7 months fasting on a mountain and returned with a dire warning. The end of days was upon us, and would be recognized by the disappearance of several rivers. Just as the Nile dried up in Isaiah 19:1-10, so would the Mississippi in America. Pastor Levy based this upon rough similarities between the 2 waterways, including the way they divide their respective countries and the manner in which multiple towns along the Mississippi share their names with Egyptian cities along the Nile. Maybe Americans interested in the Euphrates should turn their concerns closer to home. Another dire warning comes in the form of many hunger stones found throughout rivers in Central Europe. These landmarks were mostly erected by Germanic settlers between the 15th and 19th centuries as memorials of starvation and drought. They serve as warnings whenever the water levels get too low. Nearly 30 hunger stones have been found in Europe, most of them in the Elbe River, which flows from the Czech Republic down through Germany. This tradition was even carried overseas. Some hunger stones have been found in Pennsylvania, for example. Inscriptions carved upon these stones are meant to be revealed whenever the river falls too low. Most of them carry warnings for the local populace with such cheery messages as, "If you see me, then weep," or we cry, and you will cry." Look, for a second time, I thought it was going to say, "I cry, you cry, we all cry for ice cry." The warnings on the stones are meant to bring an awareness that people should begin exercising caution with their supplies lest they run out. But the messages on the other hunger stones are a bit more optimistic. Girl, don't weep and moan. If it's dry, water the field, reads one. When this stone goes under, life will become more colorful again, says another. The revelation of these landmarks often coincides with other man-made disasters. Like in 1918, during the height of World War I, a hunger stone became legible in Elbe. Since then, waters have receded enough to allow them to be read in recent years, 2018 and 22 specifically. The media has covered the hunger stones in a broad variety of contexts. Many seize upon the sensationalism of the reveal, claiming that the end is nigh. This was certainly the way that the 1918 emerge was addressed. 100 years later, coverage skewed toward the same tone with claims that they represented a dire warning for humanity. Yet in our mind, scrambled to panic, perhaps we should treat the hunger stones in a more hopeful light. Perhaps we should treat the drying euphrates in that light as well. They serve as a reminder that, in spite of the many challenges facing us today, most of the planet still enjoys a level of security and safety that previous generations never knew. Another approach might be, instead of falling to fatalism and believing that we are all doomed, to take these as warning signs. We might have time to change our fate, whether that is the fate of the planet or the fate of our immortal souls. These warnings give us time to course correct and save ourselves if at all possible. But most importantly, I want to know what you guys think of the Euphrates River drying up. Is all the things happening in the world, including the rivers drying up, just mere coincidence or potentially climate change? Or are we actually seeing biblical prophecies coming to life right before our very eyes and could potentially be entering into the Great Tribulation very soon with all the world events happening? Please let me know what you think down in the comments below. I want to hear your thoughts and opinions. And if you guys enjoyed today's video, be sure to go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button for more content just like this. As always, guys, I love you all. Keep an open mind, and I'll check you guys in the very next video.